I used to believe that if no one knew the truth, then no one could be hurt by it. I was wrong. The person who suffered the most was me. By the time I walked into the bishop's room, everyone thought I was the same young woman I had always been. I still smiled after church. I still helped Mother bake bread on Saturday afternoons. I still laughed with my friends when we quilted together in the evenings. But inside, something precious had already disappeared. At first, I couldn't even give it a name. I only knew I no longer recognized the girl I saw in the mirror every morning. The morning I decided to speak with the bishop began like every other Sunday. Mother was already kneading bread when I came into the kitchen. Father had gone to the barn before sunrise, and my younger brothers were arguing about whose turn it was to carry water from the well. Their voices usually made me smile. That morning, they sounded far away. Mother glanced at me while dusting flour from her hands. "You didn't sleep much." "I suppose not." She studied my face for a moment. "You're carrying something." I forced a smile. "I'm only tired." She accepted my answer, but I could tell she didn't believe it. A mother rarely needs words to know when her daughter is hurting. The buggy ride to church was quiet. The road stretched between fields that were beginning to turn golden with early autumn. Neighbors passed us one after another. Every family smiled. Every family waved. I waved back because it was expected, not because I felt like smiling. As we arrived, Rebecca hurried over before I could climb out of the buggy. "I've been looking for you all week. I'm sorry. You missed quilting on Thursday." I wasn't feeling well. She frowned. "That's twice this month. I'm better now." Again, it wasn't the truth. Rebecca had known me since we were little girls. She looked into my eyes longer than usual. "If you ever need to talk?" She didn't finish her sentence. She didn't have to. I thanked her and walked toward the meeting house. The worship service should have brought me peace. Instead, every hymn reminded me how far my heart had wandered. The words about honesty, forgiveness, mercy. They all seemed meant for someone else, not for me. Because people like me carried secrets. After the final prayer, families gathered outside for the fellowship meal. Children ran through the grass. Older men discussed the corn harvest. Women uncovered baskets filled with homemade bread and apple pie. Everything looked peaceful. I stood among them feeling completely alone. That was when I realized loneliness doesn't always come from being by yourself. Sometimes it comes from believing no one would understand the truth about you. The bishop was speaking with two elders beneath an old maple tree. He noticed me standing by myself. Our eyes met for only a moment. Then he walked toward me. "Would you like to speak for a while?" I nodded. I would. He didn't ask why. He simply opened the small wooden door beside the meeting house and motioned for me to enter. The room was plain, a wooden table, 2 chairs, a Bible resting near the window. Nothing more. The simplicity somehow made it harder to hide. He sat across from me. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, he asked one question. "What brings you here today?" I had practiced my answer all week. Now, I couldn't remember a single word. Tears filled my eyes before I realized I was crying. "I'm tired." He waited. "Tired of what?" "Pretending." The room became quiet again. He reached for the Bible but left it closed. "Truth doesn't begin with perfect words," he said softly. "It begins with an honest heart." I nodded. There was a time when I prayed every morning. I still pray. But now, I stopped. It feels as though my prayers never reach beyond the ceiling. Why do you think that is? Because I keep asking God to take away something I refuse to face. The bishop leaned forward slightly. "What is it you're refusing to face?" I looked down at my hands. "My own lie." He didn't seem surprised. Everyone tells lies at some point in life, but not every lie changes the person who tells it. This wasn't one lie, I continued. It became another and another. I kept telling myself I was protecting people. But every new lie only protected the one before it. The bishop nodded slowly. That happens more often than people realize. I wiped my eyes. The strange thing is, I can barely remember what I was trying to protect anymore. I only remember how frightened I became. He looked at me kindly. "Fear is expensive." It asks us to pay with our peace. Those words struck my heart, because that was exactly what had happened. No one had taken my peace from me. I had traded it away, one small lie at a time. I don't know how to become myself again, I whispered. The bishop remained silent for several moments. Then he asked a question I wasn't expecting. When did you first decide the truth was too dangerous to tell? My heart stopped, because I knew the answer immediately. It wasn't last week, it wasn't last month. It was the afternoon beside the old covered bridge. The afternoon when one simple decision changed everything, and I convinced myself that one small lie would make the problem disappear. Instead, it quietly became the beginning of the person I never wanted to become. The bishop's question stayed in the air. When did you first decide the truth was too dangerous to tell? I didn't have to search for the answer. I had carried that afternoon with me every single day. It happened almost 3 months ago, I said quietly. The day before the fall harvest began. The bishop folded his hands and listened. It was an ordinary Friday. I finished my chores early, and Mother asked me to deliver fresh bread and blackberry jam to my grandmother. She lived less than an hour away. I had made the trip dozens of times. Nothing about that morning felt unusual. Father hitched our horse to the buggy. Mother tucked an extra loaf of bread into the basket. Before I left, she smiled and said, "Don't stay too late. We'll need your help before sunset." "I won't," I promised. If someone had told me that one promise would become impossible to keep, I never would have believed them. The road to grandmother's house passed through open fields before crossing an old covered bridge. As I approached the bridge, I noticed a small crowd gathered near the entrance. A horse had thrown a shoe. Its buggy leaned awkwardly to one side. 2 Amish men were trying to calm the frightened animal, while an older woman stood nearby holding a crying little boy. Without thinking, I pulled my buggy aside. "Can I help?" I asked. One of the men smiled. "If you could stay with the little one for a few minutes, that would help." I climbed down and knelt beside the boy. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old. His cheeks were wet with tears. "It's all right," I whispered. "Your horse is going to be fine." He slowly reached for my hand. Within a few minutes, the men managed to settle the horse and replace the loose shoe. The older woman thanked me over and over. "It wasn't anything," I replied. "I was happy to help." She smiled. "Kindness is never a small thing." I continued toward grandmother's house, feeling grateful that I had stopped. I had no idea my trouble hadn't started yet. Grandmother insisted I stay for lunch. She had made vegetable soup and fresh biscuits. We talked longer than I planned. By the time I finally started home, the afternoon sun had already begun dropping toward the trees. I urged the horse a little faster. Father disliked unnecessary delays. As I neared our farm, I could see him standing outside the barn. Even from a distance, I knew he had been waiting. "You made it," he said. His voice wasn't angry, only relieved. I was beginning to worry. "I'm sorry. The horse at the bridge lost a shoe." "I stopped to help?" He nodded. "I heard about that." Then he asked the question I wasn't prepared for. "What took so long after that?" My heart skipped, because helping the family had taken only a few minutes. The real reason I was late was something else. Grandmother had asked me to stay. Nothing terrible, nothing sinful, just a simple decision. Yet, in that moment, I panicked. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want Father to think I had ignored Mother's request. Maybe I didn't want him to believe I had been careless with time. So I smiled. "I had trouble with one of the buggy wheels." The lie came so easily, it frightened me. Father immediately walked toward the buggy. "Which wheel?" My stomach tightened. "The back one." He bent down and examined it carefully. Everything looked perfectly fine. For one terrifying second, I thought he knew. Then he stood. "It must have worked itself loose." "I suppose so." He smiled. "I'm just glad you made it home safely." That should have been the end. It could have ended right there. One sentence, one confession. "Father, I'm sorry. I wasn't honest." Instead, I stayed quiet. That evening at supper, Mother asked why I had returned so late. Before I could answer, Father spoke for me. The buggy wheel gave her trouble. Mother looked concerned. Were you frightened? I looked at both of them. Then I nodded. Yes. Another lie. This one was even easier. The bishop listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked gently, "So the first lie wasn't about protecting yourself from punishment?" "No. It was about protecting the first lie." I stared at the floor. "I think so." He gave a slow nod. "That is how dishonesty usually grows. It rarely begins with evil intentions. It begins with fear." I felt tears gathering again. I told myself it wasn't important. I convinced myself everyone tells little lies. But every morning after that, I remembered. Every prayer reminded me. Every Sunday reminded me. The bishop remained silent. I continued. A week later, Father repaired another neighbor's buggy. He laughed and said, "I'm glad your wheel wasn't badly damaged." I laughed too, even though there had never been anything wrong with the wheel. That moment hurt more than the lie itself, because I realized my father trusted every word I said, and I had quietly used that trust to protect my own comfort. The bishop looked at me with deep compassion. "You've been punishing yourself ever since." "Yes. I don't think I've enjoyed a single peaceful day." He opened the Bible at last, but didn't read aloud. Instead, he rested his hand upon it. "My child, the greatest thing you lost wasn't your father's trust." I looked up. "You haven't even given him the chance to decide that." He paused before finishing. "The greatest thing you lost was the ability to believe you were still worthy of forgiveness." His words broke something inside me, not in a painful way, in a freeing way. For the first time since that ordinary Friday, I understood that my life had not been changed by one small lie. It had been changed by the decision to keep living inside it. And now, there was only one person left who deserved to hear the truth. My father. I sat quietly after the bishop spoke my father's name. For a long moment, I couldn't answer. Of everyone in my life, Father was the one I feared disappointing the most. Not because he was harsh. He wasn't. He had never raised his hand to me. He had never spoken cruelly. That was exactly why telling him felt so difficult. His trust had always been a gift, and I believed I had broken it. The bishop finally stood from his chair. "I think you've carried this burden long enough." "I know. You don't need another Sunday to think about it. You need an honest conversation." I nodded, though my stomach tightened. "I'll tell him today." The bishop smiled. "I'll pray for you." As I walked out of the meeting house, the afternoon breeze felt cooler than before. Families were still talking beneath the maple trees. Children were chasing each other through the grass. Everything looked peaceful. Yet my heart raced with every step toward our buggy. The ride home felt longer than usual. Mother talked about preparing apple butter that evening. Father spoke about a neighbor who needed help repairing a fence later that week. I answered when they spoke to me, but my mind was somewhere else. I kept hearing the same words. "Tell him today." When we finally reached home, Father led the horse toward the barn. Mother carried baskets into the kitchen. I stood in the yard for several seconds before forcing myself to move. "Father?" He turned. "Could we talk?" He smiled. "Of course." We walked together to the back pasture where he often repaired harnesses beneath a large oak tree. It was quiet there, only the sound of birds and the wind moving through the corn. He sat on an old wooden bench. "What is it?" I couldn't look at him. "I haven't been honest with you." His expression remained calm. "I know." I looked up so quickly I nearly lost my balance. "You know?" He nodded slowly. "I've known for a while." My heart pounded. "But I thought—" He smiled gently. "I never believed the story about the buggy wheel." I stared at him. "Why didn't you say anything?" He looked across the field before answering. "Because I wasn't waiting for the truth. I was waiting for you to trust me enough to tell it." His words struck deeper than anything the bishop had said. All those weeks, I believed I was protecting myself. But Father had already seen through the lie. He simply chose patience instead of confrontation. Tears filled my eyes. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't afraid you'd punish me. I was afraid you'd see me differently." Father reached over and placed his weathered hand on mine. "My daughter, I saw you differently." Fresh tears rolled down my face. "You did?" "Yes. I saw a young woman carrying more guilt than any simple mistake deserved." He smiled sadly. That hurt me far more than the lie. I couldn't stop crying. "I wanted to tell you so many times." "I know. I almost did after supper." "I know. I almost did the next Sunday." "I know." Each answer surprised me. "How?" He chuckled softly. "A father notices more than his children realize. I saw you lose your smile. I heard your prayers become shorter. I watched you leave the table before everyone else. I knew something was stealing your peace." He paused. I simply didn't know what. For several moments, neither of us spoke. The wind gently moved through the tall grass around us. Finally, I whispered, "Can you forgive me?" Father smiled. "I forgave you before you asked." I looked at him in disbelief. "You did?" "The day I realized you were hurting." He squeezed my hand. "Forgiveness isn't something we save until a person becomes perfect. It's something we offer because none of us are." I leaned forward and wrapped my arms around him. I hadn't hugged my father that tightly since I was a little girl. When we finally stood, the weight I'd carried for months felt strangely lighter. That evening, after supper, Mother found us sitting on the porch together. She looked from Father to me and smiled. "I was wondering when the two of you would finish talking." Father laughed. "We're finished." Mother sat beside us. She didn't ask what we had discussed. She didn't need to. She looked at my face for only a second. Then she quietly said, "Welcome back." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She reached over and brushed a tear from my cheek. "The daughter I know has been missing for a long time." I smiled through fresh tears. "I think she finally found her way home." As the sun disappeared behind the fields, I realized something the bishop had tried to teach me. My greatest loss had never been a lie. It had never been a mistake. It had never been my father's trust. The greatest thing I had lost was the freedom to believe I could still be loved after failing. And once I understood that, everything else became much easier to carry. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in 3 months. But the most unexpected lesson was still waiting for me. The next morning, Father handed me something that would remind me for the rest of my life what trust really looks like. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. For the first time in months, I hadn't spent the night staring at the ceiling. There were no restless thoughts, no replaying old conversations, no wondering if today would be the day my secret finally caught up with me. Only peace. As I stepped into the kitchen, Mother was already rolling dough for bread. She looked at me, smiled, and tilted her head. "You slept." "I did. I could tell." "How?" "You smiled before you even said good morning." I laughed quietly. "I didn't realize. A peaceful heart has a way of showing itself." Her words stayed with me as I helped knead the dough. It wasn't that my mistake had disappeared. The past was still the past. I had still lied, but something had changed. The lie no longer owned me. After breakfast, Father called me to the barn. "I need your help." I followed him outside. The horses were finishing their morning feed, and sunlight streamed through the old wooden boards. Father reached onto a shelf and picked up a small leather notebook. It was worn from years of use. "I want you to keep this." I looked at him with surprise. "What is it?" It was my father's. I opened it carefully. Inside were neat handwritten notes, dates, crop records, weather observations, Bible verses, small thoughts written over many years. "I don't understand." Father smiled. "My father gave it to me when he believed I was ready to become a man people could trust." He gently placed the notebook into my hands. "Today, I'm giving it to you." My eyes filled with tears. After everything. He nodded before I could finish. Especially after everything. I don't deserve this. He looked directly into my eyes. No, you don't. Neither did I. Trust isn't always given because someone has never failed. Sometimes it's given because they've learned why honesty matters. Those words settled deep inside me. For months, I had believed one mistake had erased everything good about me. Father saw something different. He saw someone who had finally chosen truth. That afternoon, I sat beneath the old maple tree behind our house and slowly turned the notebook's pages. Near the back, one sentence caught my attention. It had been written by my grandfather many years earlier. A mistake admitted becomes a lesson. A mistake hidden becomes a prison. I read it 3 times. Then I closed the notebook and smiled. Grandfather had passed away before I was old enough to understand his wisdom, yet somehow, he had written exactly what I needed to hear. Life gradually returned to its familiar rhythm. The harvest ended, the leaves fell, winter arrived. People in our church never learned the story I had feared would destroy my reputation, not because anyone covered it up, but because there had never been a scandal to begin with. Only a frightened young woman carrying more shame than truth required. Several weeks later, Rebecca and I walked home after a quilting gathering. She looked at me for a moment before speaking. "I've been wanting to ask you something." "What is it?" "What changed?" I smiled. "What do you mean?" "You laugh again. You volunteer again. You even sing louder during worship." She laughed. "For a while, I thought I'd lost my best friend." I looked down the quiet road before answering. "I think I lost her too. But I found her again." Rebecca didn't ask for more. Good friends sometimes understand that not every answer needs every detail. Spring eventually returned. One Saturday morning, Father asked if I would deliver bread to an elderly widow who had recently become ill. As I climbed into the buggy, he handed me the reins. "I trust your judgment." Such ordinary words. Yet they meant everything. Months earlier, I would have wondered whether he truly trusted me. Now I knew. Trust wasn't pretending someone had never failed. Trust was believing they had learned from it. The widow welcomed me warmly. We sat together for nearly an hour drinking tea and talking about faith, family, and growing older. Before I left, she held my hand. "You seem different." I smiled. "I hope that's a good thing." "It is. You remind me of someone who has stopped running." Her words surprised me. Perhaps peace leaves traces that other people can see. Years have passed since I walked into the bishop's room. Looking back, people often ask whether that was the hardest conversation of my life. It wasn't. The hardest conversation was the one I had with myself every day before I chose the truth. The one that whispered, "Wait another day. Hide a little longer. No one needs to know." Fear always promises protection, but it never keeps that promise. It asks for more. One more lie, one more excuse, one more week, until eventually, you forget what peace even feels like. I thought I had gone to the bishop because I had lost something precious. In a way, I had. Not a ring, not money, not a family heirloom. I had lost the quiet confidence that comes from living honestly. I had lost the freedom to look the people I loved in the eyes without wondering what would happen if they knew everything. Most of all, I had lost myself. But the beautiful thing about truth is this: it has a way of giving back what fear quietly steals. Not all at once, not without tears, not without difficult conversations, but piece by piece, prayer by prayer, day by day. If you had seen me walking into the bishop's room that Sunday morning, you probably would have thought I was carrying shame. I was. But I walked out carrying something much stronger. Grace. Grace from a patient bishop who listened before he spoke. Grace from parents who loved me more than my mistake. Grace from a heavenly Father who already knew the truth long before I found the courage to say it aloud. That day changed my life. Not because I confessed, but because I finally understood something I wish every young person could know. Your worst mistake will never define you. The choice to keep hiding from it might. The day I confessed in the bishop's room, I believed I had lost my most precious possession. I was wrong. The only thing I had truly lost was my peace, and the moment I chose truth over fear, I found it again.